My job today is in a very short period of time to try to summarize and explain what communitarian philosophy and even the social movement is all about. It's a rather unusual kind of social philosophy because the term communitarian is not widely known at all. On the other hand, there is a very large number of people hold, as you'll see when I spell it out, hold communitarian ideas. You'll find them in the Old Testament, you find them in the New Testament, you find them in Confucius. These are really very popular ideas. So I'm going to concentrate on three major communitarian elements. One is the notion that we are members of each other. And the second, that we need a moral infrastructure. And thirdly, that rights and responsibility go hand in hand. So about the first one, which I kind of called to say it in a little short way, that the me needs a we to be. The social science data from experiments psychologists conducted, from studies of prisons to a study of high-rise buildings in Manhattan, all find that when people are isolated, when they're cut off from each other, either because they've been put in isolation in prison or they're senior citizens in an apartment in Manhattan in which you don't know people down the corridor, suffer a large variety of inflictions, many of them psychological, some of them is even physiological. So it seems that the essence of human nature is not that free-standing, isolated individual, which is often so cherished in American history and ideology, but it's somebody who thrives because in a lasting, meaningful relationship with others. Now, that can be a marriage, that can be a friendship, it can be the extended family, but they have to have these two attributes. They have to be lasting and they have to be meaningful. In that sense, our grandparents were right. We kind of born halves, and we're looking for the other half to be a complete person. That doesn't have to be one other half. It could be many pieces, but we need that human whole. So for that to happen, we need to opportune communities. Communities is where we find this other relationship. Now, that can be done by allowing for wide sidewalks and porches which open to the front rather to the back, so it's easier for people to sit on the front steps and interact with people who pass by. Promenades are important. That's where people hang out together. Having local schools which are open for community meetings. There are many ways. But if communities are not nurtured, they tend to die, and that leaves us with isolated individuals. That's the first element of communitarian thinking. We need lasting relationship. We need each other. Now, the second building block of communitarianism is the moral dimension. And here, a little anecdote may help me make the point quickly. The reporter who represents the Washington Post lived for many years in Japan. That one evening there was a knock on his door, and he opened the door, and there was an elderly Japanese gentleman standing in front of the door, all dressed with a tie and suit. He bowed deeply, and he said to the reporter, I'm terribly embarrassed. I most profoundly apologize to you for troubling you, but your son put the bicycle in the wrong place. The point of the story is communities have norms, not laws, informal understanding, which are enforced by nothing harsher than people shaking the finger sometimes at each other or appreciating when people live up to these norms. And they suffice to, in a well-grounded community, to take care of an enormous amount of social business. To give you an American example, how do we enforce no smoking in public? I travel a lot in this country. I have not seen yet a single occasion in somebody said, if you don't stop smoking in this restaurant or airplane or whatever, I'll call in the police or I'll ask the management to throw you out. Why? Because once we agreed with each other that smoking in public is unacceptable, the moral voice of the community is so strong that we don't need fines, we don't need cops and such. For good society, it's essential that good part of its business will be carried out that way. We will agree with each other on what's right and what's wrong, and we enforce it by nothing more than by public education and by mutually appreciating when people do what needs doing and express our concern when they do not. The reason it's so essential because if you're going to rely on customer agents and accountants and lawyers and cops to see to it that people will do what needs doing, you need an enormous army of these. In fact, we have already, but even larger ones. So we are much, much better off when the community, through these sometimes long, difficult deliberations, decides how much environmental protection is correct. What should we do if people don't get vaccinated? Once we have these things in place, the more we can rely on our mutual understanding and informal enforcement, the better we are all off. And finally, the last element of communitarian thinking is the notion that we have individual rights. Indeed, they are what makes America so unique, a strong, strong commitment to individual rights. But rights go with social responsibilities. But we cannot have one without the other. And so from our viewpoint, a good conversation starts by saying, we have two sets of concerns. Now let's take this one example and we get this behind us. We are all concerned about our privacy. We are all concerned about the freedom of the press. But we also are concerned with national security. And sometimes there's a conflict between the two. So what happens when you have these extreme polarizing debates? The people from this side come and say, we are turning into a police state, no privacy is left. And the people on this side say, people aiding and abetting the terrorists, they don't want to be concerned with security. And we argue, the communitarian argue, that we should make as our starting point of the conversation that we faced two, often more claims. Society, I'm sorry, is complicated, and that we need to be both concerned with the freedom of the press and privacy, and with our security. And so how to sort out, once we accept that it's a difficult conversation, that requires a lot more time and details than I can go into today. But for a communitarian, it's important. The conversation starts not by assuming that one side automatically trumps the other and prevails, but to start the conversation by arguing that we do need to be concerned both with cherishing our rights, but also with serving the common good, security and public health, for example. So I hope I intrigued you enough to want to learn more about communitarianism. We'd love to hear from you. Maybe you can use the email down there and send us a message. Thank you so much.